Hello and welcome to this special short first look exploring session looking at something that is lost. We don't have what we're reading today. We are looking at the plot of the second part of the Seven Deadly Sins, or the plot for the second part of the Seven Deadly Sins. We don't have the first part of the Seven Deadly Sins. So there are seven deadly sins, but maybe we won't have all of the seven deadly sins because maybe some of them were used up in the first part. We may do a running seven sin counter to see if we can detect how many sins we're working with. So this is a backstage plot that we're looking at. You will be able to find an image of the plot online if you Google it. I may put a link in the show description, but these things disappear off the internet from where you find it, and so do hunt for it. But they're usually generally available somewhere. And so this is what you'd have backstage. It's a whacking bit of pasteboard, 15 inches by 9, with a hole in the middle at the top, to be hung up backstage, so that when you're backstage, you can go, where the hell am I? What am I doing next? All right, okay, good, and then run on. It's part of the kind of documentation that survives for plays, and as a bit of pasteboard, it's the kind of thing for which the script for the plot that might be kept backstage might have been kept in, and other documents might have been kept in. It forms as a potentially functionally useful way of just storing stage documents. There are some assumptions about what I have just said, some of which may be contradicted or questioned, but that's sort of a general outline. There may be other documentation that existed backstage, other aid memoirs to help keep a play on its feet, for the poor unfortunate actors who just run off stage and have to figure out what costume they're getting into and when they have to come back on again. But sadly, this is all we have of the Seven Deadly Sins, and we have in this wonderful room, we have Alan, we have Greg, we have Elizabeth, we have Lois, we have Dan, we have Sarah, we have Lynn, who will be reading through this text, and I'm Robert, your host, and we're going to go through it paragraph by paragraph, or chunkette by chunkette. It's sort of lineated into little boxes of action, which roughly represent a scene or individual units of actions within scenes. And I say we're going to sort of interpret this as we go and see how it all flows. So I'm going to ask Lois, could you read the first chunk of text of the plot of the second part of the Seven Deadly Sins, please?
The plot of the second part of the Seven Deadly Sins. A tent being placed on the stage for Henry VI, he in it asleep. To him, the lieutenant, a pursuivant, R. Cowley, J.O. Duke, and one warder, R. Pallant. To them, pride, gluttony, wrath, and covetousness at one door. At another door, envy, sloth, and lechery. The three put back the four, and so exeunt.
So that's our first bit of action. I'm counting a reasonable number of Seven Deadly Sins there. In fact, did I indeed count all seven? Were they all present? Mm-hmm. I didn't get any of those confused. So we've got some names of characters. We've got a tent. We've got a prop, a bit of property there. It's placed on stage for Henry VI. He's asleep. I mean, it's dramatic action that starts us off. But then to him we have, and this sort of confusion of names, because we've got him a lieutenant, the lieutenant, a pursuivant, and then we've got, are these character names, or are we thinking these are actor names going on here to it? And then to them we have the Seven Deadly Sins, 4 of them coming in at one door and 3 coming at another. The 3 put back the 4 and so exeunt. So is there a tussle between who's going to be in charge of this show? Is it this show, the 4 were in the last part, and this is the next 3? That's what's going. That's what's perhaps going on here? Thoughts from the room, Lynn?
Well, just a couple of things that I'm observing. I noticed that all the sort of minor actor parts, or many of them, have an actor's name. That's R. Cowley and Joseph Duke and R. Pallant, those are actors. That's not character names. We don't have an actor name for Henry VI. It's just like, oh, everybody knows that the leading man plays that, or something like that. So it's interesting that the minor parts, some we get actors' names, but for the major ones we don't. And I also find the completely different vein, the grouping of the 7 deadly sins, odd. I've always thought of gluttony, lust, and sloth, sort of sins of the body, as a group, and then wrath and greed and envy and pride as another group. So this grouping of envy, sloth, and lechery together, like why envy and sloth and lechery I can see going together, but how does envy group with those? It's just counterintuitive to me.
And I can give us some names. It's a Richard Cowley, a John Duke, and a Robert Pallant there. I'm just slowly filling these in as I'm going along. So it's a history kind of context. We've got a history play with morality going on. So it's an interesting sort of flow together. Sarah, I think you waved earlier.
I did, but I was pretty much going to say what Lynn said about the mix of actor and character names. I find it quite interesting though, because of course, like there is no need for clarity, because if this was something that was hung up backstage, everybody knew who they were playing. It was just a question of like, oh, who else is in this? Who else is playing what maybe, and when do we go on and when do we go off? So the fact that it's kind of like this jumble of character names and actor names, that to me makes perfect sense, because like if you were writing it out backstage, it's like, oh yeah, Henry VI, and you know, and oh yeah, Robert Pallant's going on here as a warder. It's just, that's, I can imagine if you put one of these things backstage now at a play, that's exactly what it would be like. It would be like a real like jumble, because people aren't, it's not like there's an outsider coming in who needs to understand. All the people who are involved in this already kind of understand what's going on.
Yeah, and it's an interesting question about also the way character names are used here, because I'm sort of thinking the lieutenant and the pursuivant. I'm sort of thinking, are they sort of the kind of parts that might be given to a jobbing actor who's only in for this show? You know, it's a really small part, and therefore you don't put an actor name in because you're not 100% certain who it's going to be. Whereas someone playing Henry VI, that's perhaps a much bigger part. So there isn't always an absolute logic to the way it's perhaps coming out there. Obviously, we don't know the scale of the parts, because just because you're just called the lieutenant doesn't mean you're not actually a massive part, and it works that way. But I'm just wondering the logic, and is there a logic? Because there may not actually be, because it might just be, it seemed like a good idea at the time. Lois, then Dan.
Yeah, well, I wondered whether lieutenant or pursuivant could mean that those parts were played by R. Cowley and John Duke. That's the trouble. We don't really know the convention here.
Yeah.
And again, there might not be a convention. It might, this is the problem of the, it seemed like a good idea at the time.
Yeah.
Principle, logic to these things, because of course these things may shift over time as well. As these are working documents, and this might be just this iteration from whenever this was this appeared. Dan.
I mean, I'm obviously just theorizing here, since there's not much to go on. But it just makes me wonder. I mean, I imagine that this is the bookkeeper. This is the same scribe as the one who did Sir Thomas More, was the bookkeeper for that, and was referring to his own script for it. And basically just looking at scenes and then deciding, just basically using his own shorthand and thinking of characters' names or specific actors. And I'm wondering if he was more careful to put the actors' real names for those who are going to be specifically doubling other ones there, because he needs to remind them, by the way, that's you. Since if you have to keep a running tally of what roles that you have versus other roles like Henry VI, where it's really obviously, whoever's playing that role. I know Greg, on WW Greg had worked out, he theorized about who played what. But I would imagine that would be one reason why the bookkeeper might want to do it that way.
Okay, let's get some more data. We will read 2 units back to back. Alan, if you'd read the next one, and then Sarah the one after, please.
Henry awaking, enter a keeper, J. Sinclair. To him a servant, T. Belt. To him Lydgate and the keeper. Exit, then enter again. Then Envy passes over the stage. Lydgate speaks.
A Senate dumb show. Enter King Gorboduc with 2 councillors are Burbage, Master, Brian T.H. Goodale, the Queen with Ferrex and Porrex, and some attendants follow. Saunder, W. Sly, Harry, J. Duke, Hit, Roe Pallant, J. Holland. After Gorboduc hath consulted with his lords, he brings his 2 sons to several seats. They, envying one another, Ferrex offers to take Porrex his crown. He draws his weapon. The king, queen, and lords step between them. They thrust them away and, menacing each other, exit. The queen and lords depart. Heavily, Lydgate speaks.
Okay, lots of things going on there. So it's a question of also, whether these divisions are meaningly individual scenes, because there's some of this unit of action overlaps into other things. Henry awakening, more actors or character names, people approaching other people, Lydgate speaking, Lydgate, another sort of a literary figure, as well as a historical figure, but not so there's not the overlaps there are interesting. Then we get a dumb show. We've got and we're into the King Gorboduc. Now King Gorboduc and Henry VI are not concurrent. King Gorboduc is an early Bruton king from sort of prehistory. Entirely fictional, but they're only just figuring that out at the time of this play. And Henry VI is a relatively recent actual monarch. So does the dumb show denote that we are going into some story told by Lydgate? Is Lydgate entertaining Henry VI? Is that the logic here? I'm spitballing. Lynn.
Yeah, I'm on a different different thread. So we were wondering out loud earlier if Lieutenant, Pursuivant, Cowley, and Duke is 2 people or 4 people. It looks like it might be 2, because in this entry, Gorboduc with two counselors are Burbage, Master Brian, and T.H. Goodale. Our Burbage would have played Gorboduc. He was a leading man. So it looks like these 3 characters are played by these 3 actors. So if that habit applies throughout, then the lieutenant and the pursuivant are played by R. Cowley and John Duke, rather than it being 4 separate people.
Yep, that seems reasonable. Lois, and then Sarah.
Yeah, and if one's looking for a clue as to how this play works, I would guess that possibly the dumb show is something that Henry's been dreaming, or at any rate, that seems to be the only point of his being asleep. And that there's that reference to envy between Ferrex and Porrex, and we've had envy passing across the stage, and Lydgate, who presumably is the presenter, speaks and explains that envy is going to cause a lot of trouble, and then we're going to see it in the dumb show. Something like that, anyway.
That seems reasonable. Sarah.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar. I think if the 3 have put back the 4, if this is going to be the 3 sins, envy, sloth, and lechery, I think we're probably going to have it. Maybe Henry is dreaming or whatever, but we're going to have like 3 different scenes within the framework. And this is the first one, and this is envy. And then I'm guessing we're going to have sloth and lechery coming after, but with maybe different kings or different stories, but all within the framework of Henry VI sleeping, maybe.
Yeah, that makes sense. Or Lydgate telling a story to Henry VI, or that sort of logic, or he's dreaming of Lydgate kind of logic thing. Because yes, we have obviously got a completely separate Gorboduc play that survives from the 1560s, which it shows us, Ferrex and Porrex having been gifted the crown by their father Gorboduc, but their envy towards each other means they cannot work together. And so, yeah, we know this story. We have encountered this story, even if we haven't encountered it in this play. Okay, let's get some more evidence as to what this play is doing. I think we're on reasonably solid ground with all the caveats that we've had. Elizabeth, could you read the next chunk, and Greg the chunk after, and Lynn the very short one after that?
Enter Ferrex, crowned with drum and colours and soldiers one way. Harry, Kit, R. Cowley, John Duke to them. At another door, Porrex, drum and colours and soldiers, W. Sly, R. Pallant, John Sinclair, J. Holland.
It's Queen with 2 councillors, Master Brian, Thomas Goodall, to them Ferrex and Porrex several ways with drums and powers. Gorboduc entering in the midst Henry speaks.
Alarums and excursions after Lydgate speaks.
So yes, we've got this after Lydgate speaks. Lydgate speaks. So and I think that's straightforward to the actor. Your big speech. That's your next speech. Big speech. just check your cue script backstage. Remember which speech you're doing when you come on, mate. That's and similarly, it seems to me that every time it has something like Henry speaks or Lydgate speaks or something like that, they're speechifying. It's some sort of choric and or inner monologue kind of thing. It's separated from dialogue and the scene. Lynn.
So just a small observation that has more to do with sort of social habits in general rather than the theater. They abbreviate people's first names, THO for Thomas and JO for John, or just put an initial. But evidently, this person whose last name is Brian has somehow achieved the rank of gentleman, and they always call him Master Brian. Like even backstage in this, like no one is going to see this except the actors. But the social habit is to call him the honorific Master Brian.
His name's George, apparently. Lois.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I wondered at first, whether this is a boy actor being called Master Brian. But then I thought, well, maybe Master is somebody's surname as well, or there's some version of it anyway.
So yeah, we've got lots of action. We've got drums and colours, Ferrex and Porrex being presented against each other. So we have these sort of conventional battle scene motifs that we've seen with lots of plays. And a parley before that. It's going to be one of those come and have a go if you think you're hard enough scenes, isn't it? Before we actually have alarums with excursions, at which point I suspect Lydgate then tells us what happened during the battle, but I don't know. I'm again making stuff up. Lois, then Dan.
Well, it's very interesting that Henry speaks in the middle of all of that. He must be watching it. As in a vision or something, or a dream being presented by Lydgate, because otherwise what's he doing in the prehistoric or pre-Roman battle scene?
Yeah, if the logic is that Henry is being perhaps taught how to be a king, because he wasn't a very good one, maybe that's the logic of here's what you should be. You think you've got it bad, mate, with all your civil wars. Here's some lessons from the past you could learn from logic, maybe. Dan.
This is also where it's really nice to look at the actual document. You made a good point. Somebody made, I think it was you, Robert, who made the point about every time Henry speaks and Lydgate speaks, it's a big deal because they separate them out in their own boxes for that. Even the one where it says Henry speaks, there's this long blank space before that to indicate, to sort of separate it out. And then you see that later on again with Lydgate speaking like a couple of times in that sense where it's separated out again. I think it's a very good point, by the way, the Master Brian. I had never thought of that, and I've seen that in other plays where the bookkeeper has referred to somebody as Master Reasons or whoever, and it does make me wonder why they would use that honorific term there.
Okay, let's gather a bit more data. Have I got everyone to read yet? I don't know. I'll just randomly go around. Alan, then Elizabeth, then Sarah, then Greg, and then we'll pause.
Enter Ferrex and Porrex severally. Gorboduc still following them. Lucius and Damasus. Master Brian. T. Good.
Enter Ferrex at one door, Porrex at another. They fight. Ferrex is slain. To them Videna the queen, to her Damasus, to him Lucius.
Enter Porrex, sad, with Dorden his man, RP W Sly, to them the queen and a lady, Nick Saunder, and lords R. Cowley, Miss Master Brian, to them Lucius, running.
Henry and Lydgate speaks. Sloth passes over.
Which seems a reasonable, if we're going with the logic there, which we had earlier, and envy, sloth, and lechery. So yeah, it looks like we're passing over from envy, and that's closing that unit of action in the play. So we've got battles, we've got fighting, Ferrex is slain, and there's a certain simplification. It's basically Queen enters, Damasus enters, Lucius enters. You know, this bit's a bit more straightforward. It feels like there's a series of relatively simple exchanges with very definite big character entrances there in the way it's structured. Enter Porrex sad. And of course, this is a backstage document, so there's no reason to have major exit cues because you've already exited to read the document. You're always coming off the stage. All this document is really interested in what's coming onto the stage and what might be happening on the stage once you go on and to do it. And yeah, it looks like that unit of action closes with Henry and Lydgate speaking again, so either they're talking to each other or in some fashion before Sloth moves us on to the next unit of action. Other thoughts, other observations? I don't know who Lucius and Damasus are. I don't remember them from the earlier Gorboduc play, so I don't know who they are. Maybe someone out there knows. Lois.
Yeah, well, one does notice how some of these actors are really having to run around. I mean, one doesn't know exactly whether they're just playing attendants or something, and so they don't really have to do a costume change. They just come on following someone, or whether they actually are playing new characters, but they certainly appear quite frequently.
Yeah, maybe there's some random counsellors or something. I don't know. Queen with two counsellors. Maybe are they the same? Master Brian and T. Good. Yeah. So maybe they're the counsellors mentioned earlier with the Queen with two counsellors because it's the same actors. So yeah. So they're counsellors. Oh, lovely. One day we'll write the play. We will. It feels like this is a good. This feels like a good pitch. I'd buy it. It's good. Yeah. Okay, we ready for some sloth? Fancy some slothing? Some sleuthing for slothing. Dan, read the next bit, then Lois, then Lynn. Please.
It's a Enter Geraldus, right?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Enter Geraldus, Vernesius, Aspatia, Pompeia, Rhodope, R. Cowley, Thomas Goodale, R. Goff, Ned, Nick.
Enter Sardanapalus, Arbactus, Nicanor and captains marching. Master Phillips, Master Pope, Robert Pallant, Kit, J. Sinclair, J. Holland.
Enter a captain with Aspatia and the ladies. Kit, Lydgate speaks.
Okay. I have absolutely no idea what this story is. I don't think this is a British king anymore. So anyone got any gen on these guys? Lois.
Well, the only one I know about is Sardanapalus. He was famous for luxury and effeminacy and gourmandise, and there is a famous painting, I think, by Delacroix. I think when he was surrounded by his enemies, he basically piled up all his luxuries and his concubines and everything he got going. And I think, did he set fire to the lot? Anyway, he would be an example of sloth, undoubtedly.
Yes, we are in sloth territory. Alan.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering whether we've actually moved from the faux British history into one of the Turk plays with the types of names.
That would be, reasonable. We're definitely not in Britain anymore. Sloth is somewhere else.
Aspatia is, if it's the Aspatia, the name is used elsewhere for other characters, but it could be the one who was the mistress of Pericles, right, in Athens.
Sarah.
Yeah, and I was going to say, isn't isn't she a nymph? I'm pretty sure she's in the classical tradition somewhere. I can't remember anything about her other than she's a nymph, because I'm pretty sure I've seen her on a ceiling somewhere.
She's mentioned in Chamberlain, I think. What is it? Zenocrate lovelier than the love of Jove, and is it something like brighter than the snowy Rhodope or something? Anyway, I think so. She figures somewhere in classical mythology, and presumably as someone beautiful, probably somebody Jupiter was after. When in doubt, assume Jupiter was after.
Yeah, and I think Alan's point is solid here. Is that maybe we are genre hopping within this play. Is that we've done something that is decidedly British history, and now we're doing something that is more akin to a Turk play logic, and that means that you have distinctly different costumes, perhaps, and distinctly different style to the, and that these are shows that this show is playing around with where it's set and what it's doing. No unities here, people. No interest in that game. Any other thoughts before we collect more data? No. Okay. Or I will ask Sarah to read the next bit, then Alan, then Elizabeth, please.
Enter Nicanor with other captains are Pallant J. Sinclair, Kit J. Holland, R. Cowley. To them are Bactus, Master Pope. To him Will Fool, J. Duke. To him Rhodope, Ned. To her Sardanapalus, like a woman, with Aspasia, Rhodope, Pompeia, Will Fool. To them are Bactus and 3 musicians, Master Pope, J. Sinclair, Vincent, R. Cowley. To them Nicanor and others are P. Kit.
Enter Sardanapalus with the ladies. To them a messenger, Thomas Goodale. To him Will Fool, running. Alarm.
Enter Arbactus, pursuing Sardanapalus, and the ladies fly. After enter Sarda, with as many jewels, robes, and gold as he can carry.
Then we have another box with alarum, and then we have one more unit for this one. Enter Arbactus, Nicanor, and other captains in triumph. Master Pope, R. Parr, Kit, J. Hull, R. Cowell, J. Sign. And then we're going to go into a linking bit after that. So we've got a clown. I think we can safely say we've got a clown in this sequence. A Will Fool, Will A Fool does some running. There's lots of alarums. I don't think this is a play that's going to be desperately good on gender issues, because it does seem to be about Sardanapalus is a king who is cross-dressing, and that is going to be considered within this text as a weakness, and that's going to be what this play is playing with. The ladies fly. There's gold. There's robes. There's jewels. I think the Turkish element is very apparent in what the stage logic of this is that this is about, for saying that's about sloth, it does seem to be it seems to be about display as well, potentially here with the props that may be on here. I love the way that Kit just keeps coming up as Kit. I just love that. It's just it's just Kit, such Kit. I like that. Alan.
I'm just wondering, actually, whether this section, because we've got just coming up Lechery passing over the stage, I'm just wondering whether the sins pass over at the end of the section that referred to them rather than at the beginning of.
I don't think so. I think we're fairly tidily. We went into Envy with Envy's passing over the stage. That was at the very top of the play. And then before this section, we had Sloth. I think the stage direction we're about to read of Lechery passing is for the final unit. I think that's a reasonable assumption. But it's a good question to ask. Other thoughts? There's messengers. There's a lot of to them here. This is sustained action with people coming in, and that's just basically backstage to remind you, right, you've got to come on for your cue. Nobody's coming off. You've got to come on. The stage is going to get fuller and fuller and fuller, potentially. I mean, we don't really have exits marked here. Lois?
Maybe it's also telling them who they're supposed to be speaking to when they come on.
Yeah. So you're listening out for the person that you're going to be talking to, probably as well, because the person you're going to talk to is probably the person who's been talking most recently, potentially. But it gives you a target to aim for, which works.
Yeah, because I remember hearing a long time ago about a production of Verdi's Othello at Covent Garden, where I think the actor playing Othello he'd flown in very late from somewhere and hadn't had a chance to do a rehearsal, and he has to come on and break up the fight between Cassio and Montano and address each of them, and apparently it was very obvious that he had no idea which was which.
Oh, that's awful. That's terrible.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry for him.
Yeah.
Actor's nightmare only in real life.
It happens. Sadly, it happens. Okay, let's do another little chunkette. Do a reasonably chunky chunkette. Greg, if you can take us on from Henry Speaks. Greg, then Lynn, then Lois, then Sarah, then Dan. So Greg, Lynn, Lois, Sarah, Dan, please.
Henry Speaks and Lydgate literally passeth over the stage.
Enter Tyrius, Philomel, Julio, R. Burbage, R. Row R. Pal, J. Sink.
Enter Progne, Itis, and Lords, Saunder, Will, J. Duke, W. Sly, Harry.
Enter Philomel and Terius. To them, Julio.
Enter Progne, Panthea, Itis, and Lords, Saunder, T-Belt, Will, W. Sly, Harry, Thomas Goodale. To them, Terius with Lords, R. Burbage, J. Duke, R. Cowley.
And then there's a dumb show, of which we have no details whatsoever, and Lydgate speaks, or maybe we get details in the next bit. So Philomel that seems to be where we are. So this is going into a more classical mode. So yeah, it's doing all the things, isn't it? History play, potentially Turk play, and classical literary type text. Much simpler but sort of layout so far. Is a few people come on and talk. I mean, there's action presumably as well. I mean, let's not pretend that the scene Enter Philomel and Terius is going to be a happy scene. A trigger warning for this one. It's probably a rape scene at that point, so it's not a happy thing. But that may not be what happens at that moment. But it just happens that they are alone, and that's what I suspect is going on there. Thoughts? Again, we're getting. I think we can probably assume that actually those named parts at the beginning, and then the actors following, do coincide. That you are being reminded who you are, as well as that you're coming on. That they're not separate. Most of the time, it does seem to be working that way.
But RO for Robert and then R before Pallant is rather odd.
Yeah, but that might, because there are 3 coming on there and potentially 4 names, so it could just be a, scribal error. Or they had a middle name. Who knows? Any other thoughts before we close after the dumb show? We've got 3 more units in this block to go. So I'll go Sarah, Dan, Lynn to close, please.
You're starting from a dumb show.
I've just said a dumb show. A dumb show. Lydgate speaks, and then
Enter Pronia with the sampler, to her Tereus from hunting with his lords, to them Philomel with Itis' head in a dish. Mercury comes and all vanish, to him 3 lords, Thomas Goodale, Harry W. Sly.
Henry speaks. To him, Lieutenant, Pursuivant, and Warders. R. Cowley, J. Duke, J. Holland, John Sinclair. To them, Warwick, Master Brian.
Lydgate speaks to the audience, and so exits Finis.
So there is one defined exit cue. Lydgate at the end. Remember to come off. No one's coming on after you, Lydgate. You are closing the play.
Yeah. Or the people backstage know that when Lydgate comes back after this, that the play is over. And if there's a something that comes after a jig or a curtain call or something like that, it's time. It's like now we do that.
Send in the clowns. It's time for the jig. To close everything off. So following what we can infer happened between Tereus and Philomel, we've got Philomel with head in a dish. So prop cue there. Make sure you pick the head in a dish prop. Otherwise, the scene's not going to work.
Prop table.
The scene is stuffed if you do not remember the head on a platter. Mercury comes and all vanish. All vanish. That suggests a stage effect of some description. Trapdoors, something. I mean, it's not specific. It's the kind of thing you'd have to have rehearsed and made sure you make work, because it's not very determinate, is it? I'm actually surprised how few people are getting mentioned a lot of the time. I'm wondering whether there are more actors on stage than this document is telling us about, actually. Whether this is just the primary actors, whether there's additional material there. Lois, then Alan.
Yes, I mean, I imagine people have matched up these various names with real people. I know that I think I've seen Saunders, actually Alexander isn't it a nickname for it, and there has been speculation that Ned could be Edmund Duck, that somebody who was supposed to have been an actor with this company for a while and who died in the early 17th century. And I wondered about Kit, which is presumably short for Christopher. I don't know if there was an actor named Christopher something in the company, but he only occurs a couple of times. Maybe this was someone very young. I think what happens when all vanish is that we're back with Henry VI. The 3 lords are part of his world, and all these other people vanish because they're part of a vision or a dream or something.
Yes, or it may be something connected to the mythology that I am uncertain of that particular story. But yes, we are very much back into the closing, the framing device here, aren't we? Henry speaks, so he's obviously watched it and gone, "Wow, thanks for showing me that. Am I going to be murdered now?"
I really enjoyed that.
I mean, I'm kind of expecting him to be horribly murdered at the end of this play, because if Henry VI is with a lieutenant of Pursuivant, I'm kind of feeling that maybe this is it's Scrooge's ghosts, but with a much less happy Christmas. I may be being really facetious there. Dan.
Yeah, but I think probably Warwick is coming to save the day here, I'm guessing.
Oh, that's right, because he was in prison for a while and then restored, and then
exactly for his 2 years or whatever, how long that was, that 1471 stint that he had.
Well, if he was enervated with these 7 deadly sins and to be a better ruler, he didn't take it on board, did he?
To Lois's point, that in Greg's dramatic documents of Elizabethan performance, when it talks about the plots, he's got this entire section of actors laid out and who he thinks, they are.
Yeah, I mean, the notes I've got here, there are an awful lot of possibly X, possibly Y. I mean, there's a lot of reasonable speculation you could make with a lot of these names and a lot of these things, that there are figures it could be. But of course, it could just be someone passing through the company whose name never gets properly recorded and who just disappears into the mists of time. Okay. Any other thoughts, Alan?
I've been sort of trying to keep a tally of how many people are involved, and I think we've got about a company of about a dozen people here. And I think we've got things, for example, like we've got THO Gooddale, but we've also got T Good, who I suspect may well be the same person. You know, and there's one or two others which look like they could just be variant spellings. But a company of a dozen would be feasible for a company of this time.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is absolutely bang on. But it's entirely possible that it's more. It depends on the context of which this plot is designed for. You know, is it designed for performing in a London theatre, or is it designed for on tour when you might have a slightly smaller company, or where, or is it you just don't bother marking down your additional supernumeraries who maybe have a separate chart or separate knockings to say you follow X, remember to follow the king, you're always with the king, stand next to the king, remember to wear a silly hat at this point. You know, that kind of logic that this isn't for, because this is a specific working document for a specific set of people and a specific context, and it doesn't necessarily survive. It may, you know, there might be other versions of this plot that existed at different times, and this is just the one that happens to have survived. Very few of these things survive. Final thoughts from the room. I'll just let anyone nominate themselves rather than go around everyone. Obviously, you know, we can't assess how we'd do it because we don't have it. But we could write. There's no reason why we couldn't improvise or write our own play based on this plot. I mean, it's not a desperately, and we could infer what we might do with the first part as well, because you know we know what sins we've got available, and we've got the basic schema. So we could infer have a laugh, you know, with death and destruction and sin, and question the politics of the plot. Lynn, then Alan.
Just what a tantalizing artifact this is. I mean, it gives you some really important hints about stage practice, a little bit about kind of social hierarchies where the young actors are just referred to by their first names, but if you are referred to as master, they include that in this extremely informal piece of writing. Yeah, just so interesting, and but more of a tease than anything else.
Yeah, because I mean, you know, we could nick a bit of Lydgate, because I'm sure there's more Lydgate in this than just Lydgate speaking, in the sense of I think he's some of the sources for some of these episodes. So you might be able to sort of, and you know, we could always nick bits from Gorbodoc and you know repurpose them slightly, and you know, so that there are elements here that we could almost build something that's this strange Mongol sort of creature that sort of pops in and wanders about, but. Yeah, it's a strange beast. Alan?
Almost has a feel to me of a review type show, because I mean Gorbodoc is not a short play from recollection.
It's only a couple of hours. It's not excessively long now.
No, but within the context of this, if this was an evening's entertainment or an afternoon's entertainment, you'd probably want to pick the edited highlights. So you've probably got 2 scenes out of that. You've got a couple of scenes out of a Turkish play, and I'm sure we can find one that fits with those names, and the third bit, which is a classical piece. And again, those names are not uncommon in that type of play, are they? So
what's interesting here is that, you know, what we're talking about is this is a compilation show, in the sense that we have other plays which, you know, we know of shows that are, you know, 4 plays in one, 5 plays, you know, added them. So episodic drama that may have a unity, but which is sometimes effectively only tangentially connected texts. And of course we don't know who wrote it or whose wrote it, as it were. There's no guarantee that the whole thing was written by one person. In fact, it's the kind of thing you suspect might be written by 3 or 4, because you could hive out the 3 main plots and then you get someone to do the linking material. So there's all sorts of options there. Lois?
what it seems to me rather like is an extended version of what you get in the Spanish tragedy when Geronimo presents a show to the King of Spain and the Viceroy or the prisoner from Portugal. That's a whole series of people representing English victories over Portugal. And each time I think someone says, see, that can show you that, England has conquered them, or it's all about England, but it's meant somehow to have a message for the Spaniards to make to the Portuguese. It's sort of like that. Quite disparate things, but shows. And I would guess that the success of this must have been in a variety of interesting costumes and dumb show, because that was apparently what was most popular anyway, and just kind of linking dialogue of a vaguely moralistic kind.
Yeah, and of course we get the fun of various deadly sins, how you perform those and how you costume those, and you can tell that they're the fun parts that you can throw about. Sarah.
Yes, not only are they the fun parts, but none of them are. We're not given the actor names for any of the sins. Like we're not given the actor name for Henry either. So I guess maybe if you're just playing one character, you don't get to sort of you don't get your name mentioned because you're only playing one part, so everybody knows who you are. But that is interesting because Henry has quite a bit to do. He's sort of on stage all the time. He speaks in between. Lydgate the same, whereas the sins, they just kind of pass across the stage. So you can imagine that they are roles that could be doubled with other parts, but they're not. And I find that quite interesting.
Yeah. Are they do they have masks so anyone can play them? There's that sort of logic as well. And is it how do you personify that, and do they interact with their own narrative? Are they lingering? Is there a logic to their doubling if they do double with people within each of their stories? Sarah,
you say anyone could play them, and that's true. But if that was the case, then I think names would be attached to them, because otherwise you'd have three people rushing on stage like, oh yeah, I'll be Envy tonight. Three Envies come on from different directions.
Well, it depends. Do they have? Are they speaking roles? They might not be. We don't know. So they could be again a supernumerary logic. Just walk on and stand there. Thank you very much. Lovely. Dan.
I'll let Lois go first. That's okay.
Oh well, most people that know anything about the actors of this period know that Richard Burbage became a really famous leading actor. And it's interesting with this because he appears to have certainly a leading role in the Philomel story and in the Gorboduc story. On the other hand, he doesn't appear in the Sardanapalus story as far as I can see. It's just interesting, the distribution of leading roles. There's not an awful lot for Will, who I take it is Will Kemp. Would it be Will Kemp?
I think that Greg disputes or doesn't think it's necessarily Will Kemp there. Yeah, I don't remember why, but I just remember he was like, no, not really. It doesn't mean he's not, but yeah.
Right.
None of my notes are flagging him. So it partly, of course, depends on where you date it, because of course there's quite a date. It's better part of a decade potentially when this could be about. So,
so that's the thing, is I think Stevens Longstaff has brought that up a few times about the idea that just because somebody's a leading actor doesn't mean that they're always playing the leading roles. And I think that's always an important point to remember, that obviously Burbage can they're doing these plays in rep. Doesn't have to be playing a leading role every single time, maybe playing another important role, secondary role. But in terms of it's unfortunate that we have very few by this bookkeeper. We've got the Sir Thomas More, that extract that he wrote in there as the bookkeeper, and as well as Fortune's Tennis the plot, because from those three documents, and if it was the bookkeeper for John a Kent, then it's also interesting, but he doesn't mention, I was just going through it in the Sir Thomas More play, any of the actors' names in there, which, this was a play that was presumably the book for the staging of the play. And he refers to them a lot in this plot. And then the other thing I noticed is the fact that none of the dumb shows seem to be described, at least, where it's like a dumb show. And I'm wondering, well, that would be pretty involved, wouldn't it? So there's a lot that's being relied on the actors to know what to do, or they're basically, it's in their scripts. And so he felt not the need to put that there, but then he does feel the need to put up major props, such as like the tent at the beginning or the head over later on. So it's interesting to look at what he thinks is important for it to remind people of, and then what's not important because presumably it's in other documents there.
Yeah, or a dumb show is so large and involved that everybody knows they've got to have their stuff together, whereas X might be a bit forgetful of remembering to bring the head on. Is there a sort of internal knowledge base going on there? And yeah, maybe there's a separate document for dumb shows, because maybe sometimes the dumb shows get dropped, or depending on the context of performance, because of the complexity dumb shows potentially bring up. So yeah, there's all sorts of questions which this will continue to ask. Sadly, we've run out of time. We have no more time with the plot of the second part of the Seven Deadly Sins. I'm sure we'll return to it in some context in the future. But all that I can say at this stage is thank all the wonderful readers for all their wonderful reading. Thank you very much, everyone, and goodbye. Enter Porrex, sad.